Oh, awesome. Okay, cool. Now we're recording. So if I had to boil down the past 6 months into just 3 big lessons, these would be the main things that I've learned, and I'll go through them one by one in the slides that follow. So the first lesson that I learned is that people care about privacy for different reasons. This pyramid is something that my boss showed me on the very first day. He calls it the customer identity pyramid. And mainly it just shows that people can come into our product or our community at different levels for caring about privacy. So for some people at the very top of the pyramid, privacy is very much a matter of survival and personal safety. You have people like protesters in Hong Kong, people like Edward Snowden and Amber Heard. You might not know Amber Heard. She's an actor who became a really outspoken privacy advocate when her personal photos were leaked in 2015. And so for people kind of like at this level, also like people, the community member I referenced earlier, privacy is a really serious issue. And so your communication and messaging around that should also kind of reflect that tone. But they're not the only people who you want to talk to. That's a very small group of the market. You really want privacy for everybody. So all the way at the bottom of the pyramid, you have people who might be beginning their privacy journey for the very first time. They might not know where the privacy settings are, and they're just kind of starting out. For this group of people, I think the tone of your messaging or campaigns really should be welcoming, inviting, and even a little bit playful, because a lot of times privacy tech can be intimidating. I feel like a lot of people alienate themselves from learning more because they might have a negative association with privacy-focused tech as something like only hackers do, or it's related to the dark web, or I'm not into that. Google is good enough for me. And so you really want to craft a marketing or an approach that's really warm and welcoming and inviting. And it's hard you can't be everything to everyone, right? So you have to kind of figure out who on the pyramid you want to talk to and build a campaign around that. So I thought it'd be fun to get to know y'all a little bit better and see kind of where you all are at with privacy. So I have a poll that I asked Brian to share. And yes, okay, cool. So on a scale of 1 to 5, if you could just tell me or share with the group, how much do you personally care about digital privacy? So 1 is, I don't even know where my privacy settings are, or like maybe you really don't understand how cookies work. That's totally okay. That would be 1. And then level 5 is like maybe you run Tor relays on your spare time and you are like a total privacy guru, and so much so that Edward Snowden calls you for advice. So once we have a couple of those results, we'll see kind of the lay of the land, how people feel about privacy. And I should have mentioned earlier too, one thing that makes the job a little bit fun is that privacy is definitely having a moment. Like, it's part of Apple's main marketing campaign for this year. Ever since Cambridge Analytica and GDPR, people have been more aware of the importance of privacy, but it's certainly still an uphill battle. People have kind of misconceptions about encryption and security and personal identifiable information, and then every other day there's a data hack that's in the news. So I think it's something that people really need to learn more about. Okay, we have the poll numbers are in, and it looks like most people are straight down the middle. So you're not Edward Snowden, but you have like a little bit of an appetite about privacy preserving technology. So that's awesome. I should have asked just out of curiosity, maybe you could put it in the chat if anybody has heard of Zcash before. Cryptocurrencies tend to be a very niche audience, but you never know. Some people care about crypto, or you find yeah, somebody's saying yeah, crypto. Okay, perfect. So it that can be a whole nother presentation, is how crazy working in crypto is. And I'm certainly happy to answer questions about Zcash specifically in the Q&A. But let's go to the second lesson about privacy. So this is whether privacy is like a core feature or core characteristic of your product, or just that your customers kind of vaguely care about it. The one thing I found right off the bat, like within the first few weeks of working at this company, is that privacy as a concept is very hard to explain. Once you go beyond the headlines, like beyond the, Experian data hack, or GDPR, fake news, a lot of that stuff, it's really hard to explain exactly what the feeling of privacy is. And for a customer, it's particularly hard for them to measure what their willingness to pay is, because privacy is funny in that you don't know how valuable it is until you lose it. It's like that Joni Mitchell song. I don't know if anybody's a fan of Joni Mitchell. How does it go? You don't know what you got until it's gone. So because of that, I think I've had a lot of success, or not success. I've seen people really react well when creating or trying to make the marketing and the communication around our product really focus on what the feeling of privacy is. So here you see, there's no reference to technology. In fact, a lot of these pictures are intentionally old to just illustrate that privacy is important and everybody deserves it. It's not just for illicit activity on the internet. One thing I did early on is I designed a workshop called The Feeling of Privacy, and it's something that I'm happy to share with this group in a link afterwards. It uses a lot of design thinking principles, and it's just meant to help people kind of break their preconceived notions of what privacy is and understand kind of the examples of privacy that they have in their daily lives, like a bathroom stall or a voting booth. Another thing that I have done working at Zcash is getting creative with taking something like cryptocurrency or privacy. These tend to be very niche topics referenced only in very specific contexts, and trying to make it more accessible for a wider audience. So for Valentine's Day, I wrote a blog post called Privacy is Consent. And what I did is I took the definition of consent as listed in GDPR, the European privacy law, and the definition of consent from Planned Parenthood, and compared how those two definitions are actually very similar, and why these two standards for respecting a person's ability to have ownership and have agency over their information is very important. And all of this type of stuff I think is important because you have to convince people that privacy, or you have to explain to people what privacy is before you can convince them that it's worth protecting and worth defending and worth being mindful of. So that was a lesson I learned early on, because the people who already care about privacy, for them, this is going to be engaging and exciting content anyway. But if somebody really doesn't feel like maybe they are 1 out of 5 on like, yeah, I kind of care about privacy, but not really, you first have to do a lot of education around like what this concept is to get them over the hump to start caring more about a privacy specific or privacy focused product. Because a lot of times too, there's a user experience hurdle, particularly with in cryptocurrencies. A lot since it's a less mature technology, there's a lot more user experience challenges, but that's certainly not the case with maybe more mature apps that are privacy focused. Like you see a lot of privacy focused messaging apps like Signal. So anyway, that's lesson number 2. Privacy is hard to explain, particularly from a marketing perspective. And now let's go to lesson number 3. So this, I think, is kind of the biggest takeaway that I learned. I've worked in marketing my whole career, and there's a lot of industry standard practices around digital marketing that are based on data collection. SEO, SEM, social media marketing, web analytics, all of this is industry standard practices that marketers use to find and reach and get to know our customers and our communities, and then also to build deeper relationships with them. However, as some of you can probably guess, that data collection is exactly why people have privacy concerns in the first place, right? So, you know, working at a marketing team in a privacy company, you want to be, or I have learned to be much more mindful about the data that I am collecting, if I collect any at all, and then how I'm going to use it. And that goes from everything to our web analytics traffic, and then to our blockchain explorer, like our on-network, on-chain data, how people are using our network analytics. And the takeaway here is that there's actually 2 takeaways. I'm going to explain the pictures in just a moment. But the first takeaway here is, just because you're mindful of privacy doesn't mean that you don't have any analytics or any tools at all. You can absolutely, or I have learned that we can absolutely use data thoughtfully, use data in a way that respects user privacy, and still have a very rich story to tell and really rich insights to see. We're just not always going to be able to do it turnkey, kind of like right off the shelf, let's get an analytics tool. And mostly that's because customers who invest or purchase or use privacy preserving tools, they do that on the assumption that you're going to be consistent with your respect to privacy across the board. So if your tool doesn't collect data or it gives them privacy benefits, I think at a marketing level, you also have to keep that in mind. At least that's something I've learned. So the pictures here, I said people who respect or protect privacy, they go to great lengths to protect privacy. When Zcash first started, the way that the cryptocurrency, it's built on a very specific type of applied cryptography. And the way that the parameters need to be generated for the network or the cryptography to launch involves like a pretty elaborate kind of multi-party computation. And when I say multi-party, I mean literally like multiple people around the world had to compute something on their computer, and then to secure the network from fraud or from future bad behavior, or like to compromise the network, they had to literally destroy their machines. And so part of it was like very much part of the culture of Zcash and the culture of cypherpunks that are really common, and that's part of what makes cryptocurrencies a fun place to work. But it also, I put these pictures here because it illustrates kind of the lengths that people are willing to go to protect privacy and to take their privacy really seriously. So the one thing I think is really cool and gives me a lot of hope and really inspires me to work at the place that I do work is that I think digital marketers at privacy companies are developing strategies today that don't use the traditional or typical data collection practices that we have seen in the past 10 years in digital marketing. And the reason that's really cool is because hopefully those practices that we're developing today will be industry standards tomorrow. I'm really hoping that in the next generation, people won't have as many privacy concerns because there will be a lot more privacy preserving digital options out there. So given that a lot of you said that you ranked 3 out of 5, I thought it would also be cool to end on a couple of tools that you can play with and experiment with related to privacy. If you're into crypto, you should definitely check out Zcash. And if you have questions about getting into crypto or getting into Zcash, please don't be shy. But if that's not your thing, I totally get it. It's not everybody's thing. That doesn't mean that you can't experiment or engage with privacy and just see how it feels, or I should say privacy preserving tools. So ones that I think are really good and user-friendly for people just getting started is an internet browser. Just download Brave browser. The user experience is really great. It has a lot of other benefits, like it tends to be less load for your computer, so you get a faster experience. For internet search, DuckDuckGo tends to be pretty performant. The only thing with DuckDuckGo is that you'll notice if you are a Google gal or if you like have all of your systems integrated, you'll really see once you start using privacy tools that your search history isn't saved, or that DuckDuckGo might not have be able to reference like things that you've searched in your email. And so the first couple of times I used it, I thought that was a pretty interesting observation. Signal is really fun to play with for messaging. And then if you have a stronger appetite for privacy, Tor is a 20-year-old project. They started as a internet router provider, but now they also have a internet browser. And the fun doesn't stop there. Gabriel, I think, is going to talk next about Tonic, and I thought it would be appropriate to give him a shout out. I downloaded the app earlier this week. I got to play with it. Before working in cryptocurrencies, I used to work in nonprofit media and news journalism. So yeah, I thought it was an absolutely delightful experience, and I'm really looking forward to hearing how he, what design principles he had in mind when putting it together. So I'm trying to keep an eye on the time. I think I'm going okay. I want to end here first to get, oh, Fabio, thank you for recommending privacy tools. And yes, Brave is very cool. So I want to end here on like a couple of key takeaways, and I have them written down because they're so important. One is, I think back to the community member I first reached out to, and you know, there are definitely people who care so much about privacy, and you're like, all right, that's a very small niche of people. They definitely make the job fun. I've learned so much from just talking to customers like these, and just learning about different corners of the internet that I had no idea existed. But then there's like a whole group of people, more mainstream, who just don't know that much about privacy. And that's what makes the job really important, because as engineers, as designers, as product managers, you are all creating digital tools for today and for tomorrow. And if we're not mindful about privacy, or if we don't build it in a way that's accessible or attractive to a general audience, then we're going to accidentally build a world without privacy at all. And I think like we see news around the world, like places in China or surveillance states, different digital tools, that it's just pretty scary to think about how ubiquitous those systems are. But it's also pretty nice and inspiring to think about all the digital tools that are helping us combat that. So those are my 3 main lessons, and I want to say thank you again to Brian for letting me talk with y'all a little bit. I don't know how much time we have for questions, but I'm happy to answer questions around Zcash in particular or privacy in general.
Yeah, we can do like 5-10 minutes of questions. I think we'll be still good. Yeah.
Oh, Ivan asked, oh yeah, thanks Gabriel for the, yeah. I was like, I'm totally gonna nod to him. Okay, so Ivan asks, what products and services do I recommend for those who responded 3, 4, or 5? And full disclosure, I ranked myself as a 3, and I work at a privacy company. I certainly work with people who are in the like 4 or 5 range. I think the main tools that do a huge difference are like masking your VPN. So if you have a VPN for your computer when you're on public Wi-Fi, that is really smart. And there's different VPN tools. There's one that's called Gopher, I believe. I have to look it up to get the link for you, Ivan, and I'm happy to do that. But there's some VPN tools are better than others in terms of protecting privacy. But that's a very good kind of like upgrade to your privacy preserving practices. And then other things, I think having I'm looking for my keychain, having a 2-factor authentication key fob over just using an app on your phone, that is also a very solid way to protect the security of your information. I think also one thing I've learned is it's difficult not to conflate privacy and security, although they are two somewhat separate things. Like privacy is a state that you have, and security is a condition that enables that state to exist. So if your security is compromised, your privacy is compromised as well. Oh, yeah, Outline is I think that's a Google Jigsaw product. And then Fabio is saying, oh, he wants to add more password protectors and password managers. There should have been a poll question to just ask like how many of y'all use password managers, because it's so important, and I was really bad about that before I started working at Zcash. So Bitwarden is a good one. I also really like 1Password. I thought it was, oh, please don't use 1Password. Ah, okay. So now Fabio, I learned something from you. I'll have to upgrade my password manager. So yeah, and it looks like those are the 2 questions that came in the chat. Oh, yeah, it looks password manager is pretty popular, but I'll have to read up on why it's not that great.
Any more questions for Elena? Cool. Oh, there we go. Oh.
Oh, the best designed. So we could write a book, and maybe Gabriel will talk about this in his talk. There is definitely a tension between user experience and security and privacy. So like if you wanted something to be 100% secure and 100% private, you might as well like write it on a sheet of paper, put it in a safe, and throw that safe in the ocean. And then it's 100% secure. Not even you can access it. But typically that's not what people want. They want something that's usable and delightful and feels like all of their other apps. And the more interconnected applications are, the more personalized benefits, the more customized features that people can create in the app. That has been the standard up till today. I think there are certainly teams who are working on creating those delightful experiences without using as much of your data or compromising as much of your privacy. For Zcash, the way that our cryptocurrency protects or preserves privacy happens at the protocol layer. So it's a very technical product. It's a really kind of like if you were on the internet at the HTTPS, like the hypertext protocol layer. So it's not totally B2C. We're hoping that as the product evolves and as the project progresses, community members will build on top of the Zcash protocol, and then those tools and services that are built on top of, those will have like user experience designs that'll help people go from maybe like one app to another, or transfer value or their Zcash tokens from their wallet to an exchange, or to an exchange to a merchant, stuff like that. Cool. Thanks again.
All right, thank you, Elena. Cool. So we have Gabriel, who will talk about Tonic.
Cool. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay, cool. So let me just get started. Let me know if you can see my screen, yeah? I get like a thumbs up. Cool. Okay, so my name is Gabe.
I can't see your screen.
Cannot. Oh no, I got one thumbs up.
I just default thumbs up everything.
Okay, how about now?
Yes.
All right, great. Cool. So my name is Gabe. I am a designer at a startup you probably haven't heard of called Canopy. And I've spent the last decade really thinking about the future. And I think for me, it's really important that we kind of future-proof design. And usually that means like learning new 3D tools or kind of new design systems or frameworks. But today, I think we're at the precipice of something that's maybe a bit more important than that, which is really how our products are made. So just a little bit about me. 10 years ago, I was the founding designer for a startup called Automatic, where we kind of thought about the future of cars. So we built a device that gave users a peek into the car's computer and empower them to use that to make driving more fuel efficient and fun. After that, I spent 4 years at Facebook, where we explored the future of social storytelling and media and virtual reality. Then I joined Jigsaw, where we spent a lot of our time thinking about what future threats would be for communities at risk. So we spent a lot of time working on privacy tools like Outline, which Elena mentioned earlier. And our focus there is really thinking about kind of what are the coming threats. So we spent a lot of time thinking about like deep fakes and ways in which we could be censored and things of that nature. So after spending a lot of time thinking about the future and exploring ways in which the future could be designed for, one thing really became clear for us, or for me in particular, which is that people are increasingly distrustful of technology. You've noticed that the more somebody uses technology, the more skeptic they are about its value. And that's rightfully so. You know, there's privacy leaks and existential threats to democracy, which cause people to think twice about downloading your next app. There's big tech companies that continue to exploit our social anxiety and fear of missing out, creating habits that leave us just feeling worse or lousy after using one of their products. And we just found ourselves in this cycle that the more we use a product, a technology product, the worse we feel when using it. So then what really are our options? You know, we can just disconnect completely, meditate, and throw our phone into the sea. Well, fast forward to kind of earlier this year, I joined Canopy to build an alternative to this reality. So we think that it doesn't have to be this way. And we actually think that the reason why we've gotten to this point is largely due to the way personalization works today. So we think there's a more ethical and mindful alternative to building personalized products. And we call that sensible design. So sensible is a set of principles for software engineers, designers, and product makers that respects people's agency and privacy when using digital products. So that means that sensible products use only the personal data they need and are mindful of the users, time and attention while keeping them in control of the experience. So I'd like to explore today kind of what we mean by that, and how we explored those principles for our first consumer app named Tonic. But first, like, how do we get here? Like, why do people feel this way about technology? And if we want to try to design a future where people are more inclined to use technology, then let's explore really how we got here so we don't make the same mistakes. So we think that it all started about 15 years ago with something called the Web 2.0. Now, for those of you that are too young to remember, the Web 2.0 was this idea that the internet should enable people to create and share their own content with others. This paved the way to online communities that enabled a lot of creativity and self-expression, which is all great. You know, that's what has led to things like social networks and the sharing of information as we know it today. So this then was accelerated when the iPhone was introduced. And after that, just like a huge rise in smartphones. And all of a sudden we have the Web 2.0 in our hands, and we can now post anything from anywhere. So this led to an exponential growth in the amount of user-generated content online. And all of a sudden there were viral moments that were created, and the internet, as we know it started to take shape. Then these platforms found themselves with more content than any person could consume. So naturally, companies turned to personalization as the way to address this problem. What they do is they would collect a bunch of information about a user, and based on that information, they would show only the relevant bits that were interesting. And this is kind of where the term the cloud came to be popular. Most of you are probably familiar with that. Then a business model was developed where companies packaged and resold this data in bulk so advertisers could better target across all those platforms. And then in order to measure the success of these models, companies began optimizing for engagement. So that means that the more people interacted with the products, the more valuable they thought they were. So the cloud business models and success metrics led to the misalignment of incentives between product makers and users. So as a result, every website or app now asks you for your credit card in exchange of a marginally better user experience. So companies use this data to create an assumption of who we are on the web, and then traffic that without our explicit consent. And to top it all, we can't change it or escape that assumption. So as a metaphor, like imagine if every time you went to your local bodega, well, first imagine you're able to go to your local bodega, and then every time you went there, when you bought a loaf of bread, they checked for your ID and reviewed your entire purchase history. That's kind of how the internet works today. So this is kind of the price of admission for participating online, but we think, you know, it doesn't have to be this way, and there are better, more ethical ways of creating online life. So we're noticing kind of a shift between public and private spaces, right? So people are moving from spaces like social media into more private mediums like newsletters and podcasts. So according to the podcast trend report, in 2009, it was the first year where the majority of people, that's 59% of them, spend more time listening to podcasts than social media. And podcast is a medium kind of known for having very little insight into their users, unlike social media. And over 82% of them listen to podcasts for more than 7 hours each week. So it's clear that there's a trend increasing in the demand for an alternative to how people consume content on the internet today. So our answer to that trend is what we call sensible, which I want to get into right now. So first, a sensible product is data prudent. That means that they need to be private by default and that users control how and when they share their data. Second is to be mindful, and that means that the user determines how much time they want to spend on their product. Fourth, it needs to be transparent. That means that they need to clearly explain, and in human terms, how the sausage is made. And finally, controllable, which is that at any point, any user can correct a recommendation that just isn't right for them. So data prudent, mindful, transparent, and controllable are the 4 tenets that, in our eyes, make a sensible product. So we're seeing a lot of products adopt sensible principles. And Instagram's "You're All Caught Up" feature is actually one example of applying mindfulness and transparency, even within a product that in general doesn't respect most of these principles. So we asked ourselves if we could kind of think of a product that could encompass all these principles in one. And we call that product Tonic. So that's kind of our first tab or our first proof of concept of what a sensible product could be. So Tonic is an app that gives you a daily selection of personalized reads. So what we do is that we combine machine learning and editorial input to find the unexplored parts of the web and deliver five articles every day that delight and inform you. So here's how we use sensible principles to inform the design of Tonic. First, so data prudent. So we wanted to make sure that we could deliver personalized content that people will love without knowing more than we needed about them. So we did this by using a technique called differential privacy. Now, I'm not an engineer, so differential privacy is something that other people can probably explain better than I can. But the definition of it is a system for publicly sharing information about a data set by describing the patterns of a group while withholding information about the individuals. So the way this works is we basically create a version of what you're into based on your activity in the app. So that means what you choose to tap on, how long you spend reading an article, things of that nature. Then we add noise to it, so to make it mathematically impossible to decipher who you are. And then we send that to the server, and we collect new pieces of content to recommend to you based on that. And then we send that noise version down to your phone to explain kind of like what you're about. So once we deliver your recommendations, we throw that noise representation away instead of storing it permanently. So this approach is only possible given the latest advances in mobile devices today. And what it means is that there is no longer a necessity to collect your personal data in order to deliver personalized experiences. So in fact, we don't even ask you to log in when you download Tonic. You can just download the app and go through this quick onboarding, and you can start using the app right away. So what that means is that we don't know who uses our app. We have no way to know their name, where they're from, or how long they spend on our app unless they choose to share that information with us. So this provided a unique challenge for understanding how to design for that audience. We have no way to target a specific user and learn from their behavior. So we decided to kind of lean on user feedback and create a direct channel to our team. The way we did that is by putting a feedback button right in the main screen of the app. So when people tap that button, it allowed them to send an anonymous message to our Slack channel. And we put a feedback button in the main screen that
Hey, Gabriel, you're muted.
Yes, I'm back. Can you guys hear me now? Hello. Okay, cool. You can hear me. All right. So what I was saying is when people tap that feedback button, it sends a message directly to our Slack channel. And as a result, we got some bug reports like this one. We got feature requests. We had design critiques. We had like words of praise. You know, people really like our app, and words of not so praise. Some people didn't like our app at all, which is great. I think the great thing about this is that even though we're a small team and we don't have the resources for an entire research department, we all get to see how our users feel about the product we're building. So that includes engineers, product designers, marketing, and every other area of the company that is typically not exposed to this level of user insight. Okay, so that was being data prudent. The second principle is being mindful. And what we knew is that we wanted to avoid FOMO, or like fear of missing out, that kind of made you overwhelmed every time you open the app. So we created a constraint. Instead of creating an infinite feed of content like every other app, we'd limit to 5 recommendations every day. So this made the app feel fresh and gave you a reason to come back every day without having to rely on growth hacks to bring you back. So this approach allowed us to treat each recommendation as a unique card that beautifully kind of represents the artwork, description, and a few controls for every article. Then people can manipulate each card with natural gestures and have a more focused experience that's different than your typical feeds of content we're used to seeing in other social media and news apps. And optionally, we can remind you when new recommendations are ready. And of course, people can choose when the notification is sent. And this is an opportunity to delight people while reinforcing the idea that they remain in control of every part of the experience. So that's being some mindful features. The third one is around transparency. And you know, we really wanted to avoid having a black box for our product. And I wish I had that polling feature that Elena showed, because I really want to know if anybody here can really explain how like Instagram Explore page actually works. I spent 4 years working at Facebook, and I couldn't tell you how that works. So if anybody has an idea, that's great. But you know, we wanted to kind of peel behind the curtain with Tonic and give people a clear sense of what we think they're into, so that things wouldn't just work, but people could explain how things work as well. So one of the main tabs in the app is dedicated to your activity. In that tab, we show you a full history of the articles you've read, along with how much we think you loved it, and expose this idea of a vibe that you're giving us based on your reading history. That means that, you know, it's one of the 3 tabs in the app. So that's 1/3 of the app that is dedicated to your history and to easily access that. You don't have to go hunting for, you know, a link or within a settings menu or anything like that. And then your vibe kind of changes as you read and interact with different kinds of reads every day. And we base the vibe descriptions on traditional RPG archetypes and create kind of fun descriptions of each user so they can feel seen by the app. And these are about 12 different combinations. And we found that that was a really interesting way to make people feel seen by the app. Okay, so finally, we have making the app feel controllable. Because we don't think that transparency isn't really enough. You know, a sensible product needs to tell you how things work. And if you disagree with the recommendations that is being given you, you can then correct it, and you have some agency over that. So we did give people a couple opportunities to do this in Tonic. In this activity app that I mentioned earlier, for every read in your activity, we expose how much we think you loved it. So typically most apps do this, most recommendation systems do this, but the difference here is that we show the user how much we think they love each piece of content. And the difference here is that you can long press to correct that if that is something that you don't agree with. Now, if you're not into the recommendation at all, you can long press to swap it for another one. This was a particularly interesting challenge because we wanted to avoid encouraging people to use this mechanic to get into a rabbit hole of reading more than 5 articles every day. We wanted to make Tonic feel finite and something that you can finish consuming, as opposed to something you can get lost to for hours and hours. So we consider tapping a button to get 5 new articles, kind of totaling 10 total articles, or replacing all 5 articles for a new set of 5. Eventually, we settled on individually swapping on an article, 1 article at a time, to encourage kind of a thoughtful interaction with the app that gave each piece a time to shine. So those are the kind of high-level inspirations of the 4 key sensible principles, but there's still a lot of kind of unanswered questions that remain. You know, Tonic is just a small app and the proof of concept for what a sensible product could look like. And some of these features may sound familiar, but we believe that when combined together and designed simply into the foundation of the product, they can deliver something that's really new. But you know, there's still kind of a lot of unanswered questions, like how to scale these principles to a product that serves millions of people. How do you build a sensible social platform? And how do you transfer your recommendation profile across devices? You know, at Canopy right now, we're exploring these questions and we have some answers to them that we'd like to explore. But one of the reasons that I'm excited to be here talking to you guys is to explore how we can answer these questions together. And we've already kind of seen other products adopt sensible principles like these. For example, Cocoon is a private social network for families that keep you in control of the experience. It's actually made by 2 ex-Facebook folks, so they clearly understand social dynamics and they want to reinvent them within a private context. Hometown is an app that delivers local news while keeping your data private. Hey is a new email client that promises to build a sensible product that comes from the folks that made Basecamp. And others like Planetary are attempting to build a sensible social platform. So, you know, as we sit here and talk about the future and kind of these emerging trends of design, I hope you consider a future that is more prudent with your data, mindful, transparent, and controllable. That's kind of my spiel, and I'm really excited to kind of like share with you guys and hear what you think and start a conversation around this new way of making products. And if you have any questions, I'd love to answer them. Anybody? Okay, so there's a question here that says, I'm curious if you guys know how people have interacted with the dismissible, replaceable stories and how much time they spend on the app. Has it helped them not fall down the rabbit hole? Yeah, so one of the things that we've explored is how to do private metrics. And one of the challenges there is that we don't really know which individual user does anything, but we can aggregate usage based on their behavior. So we know whether a feature has been used, we just can't pinpoint who used it and what their kind of characteristics are. So we find that one thing that we found is that if we expose these control features to the foreground and we we give people tools to interact with their content, they actually use them. And lo and behold, if you don't hide those tools behind a setting somewhere, people actually feel empowered and curate their experience by using those tools. So that feels like a positive thing where we're introducing features into the app and people are actually taking advantage of them. Okay, Ivan asks, giving users privacy, what do you lose as a company? Revenue, analytics, ease of use, dev speed. Well, you lose kind of like the foundation for how tech products are built. A lot of kind of the way success is measured needs to be rethought when approaching something from a privacy focused point of view. So yeah, like many tools that are used, let's say, to measure analytics are don't respect your privacy in the ways that we wish they did. So we find ourselves either building our own tools or kind of like jumping through a lot of hoops to do things like marketing, analytics, like even the way you prove your success to whatever stakeholders you have, that is needs to be rethought to be something that's more mindful of people's privacy. Okay. Is Tonic available outside of the US? If so, what subtle differences are there in how it functions in the US market compared to international markets? So one thing that we're doing with Tonic is we're combining editorial input with machine learning. That means that we have a team of editors who bless every article that we pump out on the app. Because of that, until we're able to expand that team to be international, we have limited Tonic to be within the US only. Because our perspective is from the US, we think that, it wouldn't be great to release to other countries to receive kind of like a US centric point of view. So until we can expand that and expand our team to have an international representation, we've made it US only. How would you convince more conservative / old school stakeholders to get on board with sensible products? Yeah, that's one of the big questions. I think that one thing that we are hopeful is that we can actually create a better experience by creating a private product, because once the user trusts that the product won't abuse their trust and won't use their personal information against them, then they're actually able to give more personal information, and that will give more like better personalized products, right? So we believe that if we actually can deliver a better experience to our users, we can use that data to bring it to more conservative stakeholders to prove how a private product is actually better than a not so private product. So that's one of the one of the kind of silver linings here, but that is one of the biggest challenges, is kind of getting people who aren't typically privacy minded to care about privacy as much as we do.
Cool. Are there any other questions? Great. Thanks for the talk, Gabriel.
Yeah, of course.
Wait, is that a last question? Is there an Android version in the works?
It's kind of like the stock answer. We're a small team. We're about 10 of us, and we're focusing on one platform first. And once we can reach some degree of success there or product market fit, then we would expand beyond that. But so far it's iOS only, unfortunately.
Cool. Good for those iPhone lovers out there. Yeah, thank you so much both for your talks. I think for the remainder of the time, we're probably gonna close out over here. We don't know when our next talk will be. We're really hoping for it to be in person, obviously. But until then, we might just probably like end up hosting a bunch of like different meet and greets or virtual happy hours as we try to figure out the landscape. But yeah, feel free to stick around on this line or close out. Feel free to turn on your video cameras. We mainly asked you to turn off the video cameras just to make sure we have the bandwidth, making sure that things are not lagging behind. But yeah, thank you and have a good night. I'm probably going to stick around for a little bit. Would love to hear any type of feedback that you have for this type of format, how we can make it better, stuff like that. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for
Thank you, everyone.
watching. Have a good night.